Hey guys, thanks for joining me today. So I'm really excited to bring on Julian Love. He is a friend and he's someone who I wanted to pick his brain for a long time. He has a massive experience in the game industry. And Julian, welcome. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. Yeah,
Yeah.
it'd be fun.
For anyone who doesn't know who you are, can you just give a little bit of a background of, who is Julian Love?
Sure. Um, yeah, I'm a game designer. I have worked in the games industry for 28 years. Um, and through most of that, about 19 years of that, I worked at Blizzard Entertainment. Prior to that, I spent some time, about 6 years, at a company called Sierra Online. I don't think they exist anymore. Sometimes their name still pops up, and if you're old enough, you might remember
Mhm.
some of the old Sierra games like King's Quest and maybe Leisure Suit Larry or Royal Casino or something like that. And I've held lots of different roles throughout my time as a game developer. I started out as an artist. Back when I started, I was just called a 3D artist at Sierra Online. Hadn't yet divided everybody into all the different roles that we have today. But over the years, I transitioned from role to role. Started out as environment, ended up doing characters, then character animation, eventually art direction. I didn't really care for that so much, so I jumped back down into tech art. I was really excited about that right around the time that Maya showed up. But then I kind of realized I was really more of a designer at heart than I was really an artist, even though in my head they're sometimes the same thing. And I moved on from tech art to VFX art to finally like my last, I would say, 4 years or whatever at Blizzard. I was a combat designer.
Wow.
So yeah, held lots of roles doing everything. And these days, my title is creative director and co-founder of a brand new studio called Gas Giant Games. Yeah,
That's
that
amazing.
is
Wow. Yeah, I see
just
the logo behind it. It looks pretty. I like the logo. I like the whole feel of it. So I can't believe you were actually a 3D character artist. And did you enjoy doing that? Did you like were you more of a concept artist, or were you like initially when you started, or somebody gave you concept art and then you had to model from that? Like what was your little experience there during that?
No, like we're talking 1996 here. And even though I was working in 3D, we were making a sprite game. So like 3D had just started to happen as a thing. There were like the first 3D cards had come out, and at the time that I started, I think there was like Doom. Like that
Like
was
box modeling, like literally just like a box with a texture on it.
yeah. And it wasn't characters. I got started with like sort of hard surface environment. That's what we would call it today. And and so at the time, it was sort of like this. I had been dabbling because I wasn't yet in the games industry, and I had been dabbling in just 3D in general for a long time. And I got attracted to sort of more of the film end of the products that were out at that time, the ones that had a lot of muscle. And at Sierra Online, they were using the precursor to 3D Studio Max, and it couldn't handle a lot of polygons. Like
Mhm.
the quote at the time that I heard was something like 100,000 was the max that it could do. And the apps I was working with were could just chew through a million and no problem because they were built for like things like Star Wars. The first job I had was to make a casino Victorian style based on the famous Post Hotel lobby or atrium room in San Francisco, which is very complicated. There's just a lot of architecture going on, and that was all pre-rendered. And all of the, as I understood it, the other artists at Sierra Online said, "No way, you can't do it." And then it was my brother who was on the team at the time called me up and said, "Hey, nobody up here can do it. Do you think you could do it?" And I was like, "Yeah, no problem." Like, because the apps I was working with could just handle it. So, the million polys was like maybe a minute to render a full render back then. Um, but I think Max couldn't even address the number
Wow.
of all. So yeah.
Wow, you're literally like one of the like original artists in the space. That's so crazy. So that was one of my next questions is how did you actually ended up working at Blizzard? Like what was the process of getting in there and then staying there for, did you say over 20 years, right?
Yeah, almost 20. Well, I had been working at Sierra for about 6 years, which even back then, 6 years at a studio was a long time.
Yeah.
And but that studio had really sort of started to just it was dying. Like it was just getting smaller by the month. And we were down to something like three game teams, and they weren't looking very good. Like things were just looking very sad. And I knew I had to make some kind of move, but I just didn't have a lot of clarity on what it was. And this is a story. This is how it goes. Is I remember I was playing Diablo a lot, Diablo 2. I was consumed by that game. I would play it every minute when I went home, and sometimes I was doing like trading and stuff while at work, and I was talking about it a lot. I was just very into that game. And one day, one of my coworkers just asked me outright. He just said, like, "Why are you here?" Because the company was dying. Everyone was looking for a job, and it's why like the same reason. He goes, "No, no, that's not what I mean." He's like, "Why are you here? Why aren't you at Blizzard?" You 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 eat, sleep, and drink and breathe Diablo. You know more about that game than anybody I know, and you totally seem like you could be able to work there. We don't understand why you work here. And then I just sort of I remember going home, and it just hadn't hit me that maybe I was ready to take a stab at working at Blizzard, which had kind of been in the back of my mind as the ultimate like end of career place to land. Like that was my I'm going to get there one day company. I just kind of I think assumed in my mind it would take a long time and I would have to jump through multiple companies before I could
And this was like in 2000 something, right?
This is 2001. Yeah.
So
Uh,
by then, Blizzard was already established as like one of the top companies, right?
oh yeah. I
With
mean,
the
you had
World of Warcraft, yeah.
multiple Warcrafts. You had StarCraft out. You had D1 and D2. Um,
Yeah.
and World of Warcraft was on the way. So, and War 3 was about to ship or just had shipped. So,
Wow.
yeah, it had already shipped, and I was playing that too. And so I just identified with the company. It was really clear to me that unlike my time at Sierra Online, it was really clear that making the best product really wasn't always the goal. There were a lot of people who stood in the way of that, but you could tell with Blizzard Games that there was a different set of priorities and a different set of values, and that really appealed to me. So I went home and kind of was like in a daze, sort of like, hey, wait a minute, have I been thinking about this wrong? And went in the next day and I gave notice, and it happened to be the week of GDC. I got on a plane, flew down to San Francisco. Where I worked was in Washington State at the time, and walked up to the Blizzard booth. And there was a sort of a snarky guy at the booth who immediately saw my resume and said, "Oh, Maya," and he just chucked it in the bin, like
Next.
he made it clear I was not going to get hired. And I was like, well, yeah, I took my shot, but clearly like the only way to work at this company was to know a 3D studio, and I was a Maya guy. And so I remember I started walking away from the booth. I got about 20 steps and somebody tapped me on the shoulder, and it was an animator from Blizzard North who said, "Hey, were you just at the booth? Did you say you know Maya?" And I think he had my resume in his hands. And he said, "Yeah, we need a technical artist who knows how to do stuff in Maya. We just switched on my team, and I'm the one who kind of currently has to rig, and I hate it." That's what he told me, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm your guy." And so, yeah, they called me back a month later, and I went and did the interview and got the job.
Wow. He
So
was
I
almost like an angel. That's awesome.
two more steps down that hallway, as crowded as it
Wow.
was, he would have lost me, and that would have been it. So,
Wow. Timing is everything. Holy cow,
man,
that's
yeah,
crazy.
came very, very close. Yeah.
That's like winning a lottery. You just gave me chills. That's amazing. Look, just a couple of seconds and the whole
Yeah.
path for you could have been different.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
That's insane.
I will say, I think it's a lesson for a lot of people. Luck, people who entirely credit their success to themselves, have got to be joking. You should credit yourself for all the work you do. I worked really hard to get my skills and my resume and everything in place, ready for that moment. And I wouldn't have gotten hired if I didn't have those things. But also luck is plays an equal role as well. It isn't all just about skill sometimes. So
Absolutely. Wow, that's amazing. All right, so now since you were at Blizzard for so many years, my next question would be, can you just share like what would be the most challenging and rewarding moments at Blizzard? Like give me a couple like really high peaks and then
yeah,
one maybe that's like holy cow, you know?
it's man, it's so hard. 20, like that's the most one of the most challenging studios I think to work at. Especially, I mean, now for different reasons, but back then for because it was just like everybody is so good. Like everybody like next to you that you're surrounded with is
Just
just
like Michael Jordan.
yeah, it's this fucking amazing place. And you know the expectations are insane for the work that you're going to do. Not actually so much from the company that they were there, but it's for the audience. Like I love and loved so much Diablo 2, and my motivation was to be a part of the next one. And I didn't want to disappoint anybody on that front, you know, and so it's very difficult to pick out a lot of those things. But if you ask me for like high level stuff, that you know, looking back, what were the really tough things to deal with? I think the very first one that I encountered there was coming from Sierra. There was never a chance to redo things. It was like you made a game in 9 months. Like 9 months, 20 people are going to kick out 3 games. And at that pace, you just chew through the work and you put it out, and that's it. And if something doesn't go well, that's it. I'm sorry, it's shipping. At Blizzard, you could tell like that wasn't going to be the thing. Like they were going to take their time. And so you imagine that the fantasy is, oh, no one's going to force me to ship bad things, and I'm going to get to be able to redo things until they're like really good. And that is true. But what you don't expect is how often they're going to throw away so much of your work. I think the fantasy that people have working there is it's going to finally they'll have all the time to be perfect. And what they don't expect is, yeah, you're going to work sometimes for 3 years on something, and then an executive is going to show up and says this is garbage and throw it all away and make you reset. And the first 3 years I worked there, all of my work was thrown away twice.
Oh my
This I
God.
did not anticipate, and it's a different kind of stress. And it's in the pursuit of trying to make the best thing. And the truth is that what we were making at Blizzard North wasn't. It just wasn't. It was never going to be something that made the audience happy. And it was the right call to chuck that stuff in the trash. But man,
Wow.
I've never had 3 years of my work thrown away before. And so I think that's one. I think on the other end of the spectrum, you know, that's sort of at the beginning of my path. If you want to jump to the other end, it's watching the company that like was such a good match for my values. Like the reasons why I went there was one, it was my favorite game is made there, Diablo 2, and or Diablo and just in general. And the second, and I knew that the people there were going to be awesome, and they were. And I knew that the values of the company aligned well with what I wanted. I wanted to make great games. I didn't want to make average, and certainly not. Nobody wants to make shit games, but you know,
Hmm.
everybody wants to make something great, and I knew that that was a place where it could happen. And so watching that shift though, companies just don't stay the same. This is something that I took a long time to learn is that there's no such thing as a company that just is always who they were at the time that you fell in love with the idea of working there. They all change for reasons. And Blizzard was owned by a publicly traded company, and eventually that catches up with you at some point where you know capitalism demands growth, and so there's no way for Blizzard to stay this same sized, sort of smallish, medium sized developer that focuses only on quality. It's just at some point the demands catch up with you, and they did. And it happens slowly. It doesn't happen like one day. Like everyone likes to say this that one day Activision showed up and Blizzard was destroyed. This is not true. It had been like slowly been eating away from the inside all along, both on the Blizzard side and on the Activision side, and it happens at a rate that you don't necessarily notice every day. It's just think one day something a little bit is off, and then the next thing another little bit of thing, and if you don't really track it, you don't notice it, and then eventually,
And then
like,
you get used to the little thing that happens, so you don't pay attention to it when the
right.
next thing comes. And just like, wow, yeah, I
Yeah,
see
so
it.
I think there's a good parallel for this. If you put a frog in a pot that's boiling, they won't
Hmm.
jump out. But if you put them in a pot that's normal and then slowly turn up the heat, they won't jump out because they don't catch on to what's going on. Eventually, though, after 20 years, I start to realize like the problems that I'm facing in my career which are at that time the realization that I may not be able to make another great game at this company. It just might not be possible anymore, and realizing that it's endemic. It's sort of rotten at the core, and there's nothing that I, as an individual, will be able to do to make that better. This was a really hard thing because I kind of had it in my mind that Blizzard was the end goal. It was the place where you go to. I was going to retire. I had no
Yeah.
plans to start my own studio
Well, it was
ever.
like the Rolls Royce of the game industry at that point, at that
Yeah,
time.
yeah. You're like
Wow.
you've arrived. This is it. In
Yeah.
fact, for years, I took no LinkedIn connections or anything because I was like, why do
Yeah.
I care about LinkedIn? I'm going to
Right.
be here because
Yeah.
it really was awesome for so many years. My first 3 years there, even with all of the work being away, I went to work on Cloud 9 every day. I'm at Blizzard North in the Bay
Wow.
Area. The sun is shining, and I'm working on my favorite game. What the hell is going to go wrong with this?
Oh my God. Yeah.
Right? How can it ever be bad? This is it. Like I'm just gonna chill and do my best,
Enjoy.
enjoy this, right? So
Yeah.
that's how it was. I even with all the ups and downs, it was always a great place to be, and the people were overwhelmingly amazing, which was the opposite of where I had come from Sierra. At Sierra, you were lucky if you had one or two amazing people on a team. Here, and then you kind of got like maybe
What do you mean by amazing? Like a lot of egos?
no, it's not egos at all. It's actual ability to kick fucking ass. Like
Oh, okay. Talent, talent,
somebody like, well, it's not even talent. It's drive, awareness, purview. People
hunger.
who
Yeah.
are there for the game and not themselves. People who are
Mm,
driven by common purpose and are smart and talented and all of it's all of it. And
right. Okay.
these full package individuals, you don't, and it's Sierra Online. You were lucky if you had one or two of these, like just great, like people that you were working with, people who really make you want to come in every day and push you and challenge you and make you grow. This
Hmm.
was unusual. And then when I step into Blizzard, it's the opposite. It's a literal opposite, where like I can count on one hand all the people I worked with at Sierra Online that were like that. At Blizzard, I can count on one hand all the people that weren't like that. Like everybody is amazing. And it's like,
So, like, if you're a mediocre at Blizzard, you probably stand out like a sore thumb, right?
no, you didn't get hired,
Oh, okay.
generally speaking.
But if you did get in through like family or friends, like
Yeah, yeah.
everyone knows that, okay, that guy sucks.
If you were there for, if you weren't really cutting it, it's because you had some funky angle like that. And then everybody knew and they resented you. And like there's always some amount of those, but it was extremely low. Like I said, I worked, well, I don't think I said this, but I worked there for nearly 20 years. My list of will not work with that person again is it's like I think it's less than 20,
Wow.
which is insane.
And it's a huge team. Like for anyone who doesn't know, Blizzard, the headquarters that you guys have in Irvine, that's like
It's,
5,000.
yeah, it's like 6,000 people now.
Wow.
And
That's an empire.
the teams are all 60, 80 plus, or
Yeah.
200 or 300, and I worked with people from all sorts of teams. Predominantly, well, I kind of have trouble with this one thing that I think is in the common narrative in the public right now is people like to say, because it's shorthand, like Blizzard has problems or Blizzard didn't do this well or Blizzard this. And I think the sucky part about that is there's a whole lot of really good people who get lumped in with what is Blizzard, who have nothing to do with the problems at Blizzard.
Mm.
Overwhelmingly, the people there that I worked alongside with are just amazing, awesome people who care as much about the games as the fans do, if not more. There's people who mostly got moved across the country and sometimes across the world to work there. And so um, it does kind of suck to see that like people like that get lumped in with some of the discord that's out there.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. It's amazing to hear you speak about this stuff because I've never really, for 20 years I had my own game company, and then when I got away from that, I started joining a lot of little small companies or freelance companies. So I never got the experience of working in a large triple A studio like what you're describing. So I'm fascinated by all of that stuff. It's so cool. Okay, so just so once you spend so much time in in that company, and you felt like you could retire there, what caused you to obviously quit and now start your own company? What is the transition or the reasons for that?
Well, some of them are the things that I was recognizing, like, hey, the company is just shifting. Gameplay first stopped being it in some projects that I worked on, just stopped being the number one thing, and that's a shift in values. You start to see it and you start to realize. And so I think one of the core things for me was I still loved the people I worked with. I still wanted it to be better. Um, but at the end of Diablo 3, I kind of made myself a bit of a promise, which is I think Diablo 3 did come out like a really good game. Like 65 million players.
Wow.
You didn't make a bad game, right? But
Yeah.
it doesn't mean that I was happy with it, and because the fans weren't entirely happy with it, and they never are entirely happy with everything. But I think some of the things that they were unhappy with were things that I saw when I was working on them. I knew they wouldn't be happy with them. I could see that they were wrong, and I wasn't able to like I did not have the design strength or the influence to be able to write those portions of that ship. And so afterwards, I there was sort of like a hard think, and I know this is going into a lot of big answers here, but it comes down to this: is I kind of made myself a bit of a promise, which was I'm not going to be a part of shipping another ARPG with the word Diablo on it that is not satisfying the fans. At least in if I can see why it's going to be a problem. There's always stuff that you ship in games you just don't know until you get
Hmm.
it out there. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, look, I can see that the item game isn't working, and then lo and behold, it doesn't. Okay, that's an avoidable error, and a big one. So I was like, I can't do that again. I can't go through the disappointment. I came here to make like a viable successor to the previous games. And in some ways, I didn't feel like we had done that. And I only was interested in writing that on the next version. And at some point, it became apparent to me that that just wasn't going to happen. And I'd spent like 2.5 years on the D4 project trying to get it there. And it was like clear, like
But
this is
ultimately, is that like the management, or is it just like, is
Yeah,
it like what's the
it's
reason?
it's a long, deep
It's a
dive,
big,
but
big
like if you want to simplify it, like I would say ultimately leadership being made out of
leadership.
predominantly people who have no experience with the franchise.
Ah.
Like almost the entire directors team and everyone above had were half of them were new to the company, like they'd never even worked at Blizzard. They didn't necessarily have like the grounding of the values or anything. They didn't necessarily adhere to the kinds of things that we felt were important, and they also just weren't that familiar with the franchise. I think in the case of Diablo specifically as a game, it's elusive. You can't actually be a player who's because we interview people. We say, have you played it? We don't hire people who haven't played it. And they say, oh, I
Mhm.
played it a lot. Well, what's a lot? And then, a lot turns out to be maybe they played the campaign twice, which is fair. That's what most people do. But I would say if you've only played the campaign a couple times, you don't really understand the deep nuances of the game. And unfortunately, that's a game where not understanding those things is is extremely bad. Like things are going to go poorly if you don't. It is an elusive and very difficult game to make, and it requires intense study. So seeing all of that, like in motion. I did my best, and I just got to a point where it was clear, like I this just isn't going to. I don't believe it's going to get there, and I don't believe me putting more time into it is going to get it there. And it's not good for me, like as an individual. My stress levels were really high. And so I made the choice to move on to the Blizzard's other Diablo project, which was Diablo Immortal. That even though I wasn't exactly excited about making a mobile Diablo, actually, I really was excited about the team there because I knew those people and I knew the way that they operated. And it was smaller as well. So I did that, and eventually, right around the pandemic time, is when I got a call from a former colleague, Jay Wilson, who was the game director for Diablo 3, who said, "Hey, do you want to start a studio
Oh,
together?"
wow.
And that what I actually answered yes before you finished the sentence. Uh, I
Oh,
was
wow.
I was ready to get out, and I knew what that opportunity meant. I knew that it meant one, I really wanted to work with Jay again. We had a fantastic relationship on D3, and it also meant a number of things, which is like having creative control over what we were going to make. There at my company, there isn't an executive layer that gets to like I'm the executive
Yeah,
layer.
you get to call the shots. Yeah.
Yeah, like if it sucks, it's my fault, and I'm okay with that. Like I'm all right with shipping something that if it has problems, it's our fault. What I'm less okay with is being forced to ship something where it's somebody above us not understanding the product, and it's they're the ones, and I don't have any way to deal with it.
Of
I
course.
would much rather fail on my own merits, basically. So this is a chance to do that and or succeed on them. It's not always going to be bad. So
That's,
that's the goal, is to ship a good game.
yeah.
So yeah, creative control is super important to us. But also the other thing I think people don't necessarily anticipate about working in games is that the teams are large, and you rarely have a lot of control over who you end up working with. And
Mm,
so even when you have a team that sort of like develops really clear hiring standards and works on their hiring skills, it doesn't mean that you don't end up in situations like with the pandemic where you have a lot of turnover and suddenly you have to hire rapidly. And when that happens, you lower your hiring standards. And suddenly you're not getting these like A players anymore. The other one is this upper management can just show up and say one day, nope, this guy's out, this guy's in for whatever reasons, good or bad. And the next thing you know, like one day you were working for like a really awesome leader, somebody that you learn from every day, and the next day, maybe not so much, right? It's you're sort of just swimming in an ocean of politics, I think, in a large organization like that. And some people are really good at that, and then some people are
mm.
good at it and maybe don't enjoy it.
Yeah, that's sad. I mean, if somebody comes in and they're making decisions based on accounting, but they don't really understand the team and the importance of each individual, then you could just say, oh, this person is making too much or too little. They're making all the wrong decisions, and over time, of course, it's going to harm the company. Wow, that's crazy. So Jay called you, and then you two of you started the company, or there's more people?
There's more people. And so yeah, the first thing was number one, before we even talked about game, it was who. Let's make sure that the people we're working with, the people who we want to work with and want to work with us, and that we are aligned on values, like our core values. What is it that we want? How do we want to spend our remaining time in the games industry on this planet? Like, who do we want to be with? Because I think the wall that Jay and I both hit simultaneously is there's just no reason to spend one more second
Right.
with difficult individuals who aren't aligned on common purpose. And there's no reason to be working on a game that you aren't in love with. Just
Absolutely.
full stop. A-
Yeah.
Anything else you're doing is a complete waste. And so the next person that we brought in was Dan Kelly. We knew that we are two you know, maybe experienced, but sometimes optimistic designers. And what we don't really have necessarily is a business acumen or business background. When you work in a big company, you're shielded from that. You don't get a lot of exposure on the legitimate actual business sides that are important and affect you. And so Dan Kelly, who comes from the publishing space on from Disney and formerly THQ, has that in spades. He's done that as well longer than we have been designers. So we that was like, whew, thank God we don't have, we have
Amazing.
somebody to help
Uh,
navigate all the difficult parts with getting funded and just like running a business. And so
wow.
he's on board with as CEO.
That's incredible. So it's mainly three guys then, three musketeers.
As the founders, those are the co-founders, just three of us.
Oh,
And
awesome.
three was important to us, actually. Something we had to learn over time is you just you make a lot of decisions much faster when you're just three versus if you're four and you have the whole like tie breaking problem. And so but it also turned out that we complement each other really, really well. That as challenges arise, like some of us are just more able to take those on. There's always a thing you hate or dread doing,
Of
and
course.
you would say, "Man, oh God, I got to do that," and then it turned out somebody else is just they're like comfortable with it, and we sort of settled into this nice vibe where we're just very supportive of one another, and it was really clear, like this group here, like it works, and having a solid foundation in the company is super critical, right? So yeah, that just sort of fell together. And it turns out like Dan is also, it's somebody that he's somebody that Jay had worked with before during his days at Relic, making Dawn of War. And I think that's another key to the company is that we are only hiring
Trust.
people that we either know directly because we've worked with them, or the person who's recommending them is somebody that we have ultimate trust in.
Yeah.
And so, like the people that are coming in are the people that really should be here.
Well, you're just listening to, you're just really lucky that you even, your ability to get stopped by that animator initially and then having Jay calling you, like you have like these
Yes.
incredible moments of guidance that are absolutely beautiful, and that's amazing. That's so inspiring. Very cool. So now one of the most exciting questions is, can you tell us a little more about the current game, the secret game you're building? Like, what is
Yeah.
this? How did
Yeah.
you go from Diablo to, what is this thing you're building?
Yeah. I this is the hard part also because I wish I could just talk
Show me
openly
stuff.
and show you stuff and give you the title and everything. But it and not because we want to be secretive, but because we're just early and
Of
there's a
course.
lot of things that haven't been decided on. Like we haven't yet decided on the name. Um, just because we're focused on the fun part right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like, well, here's what I can share. Instead of telling you what I can't, it's easier to talk about what I can. So it's going to be what I think today we would call a loot-based co-op ARPG, which is an action role-playing game. Now, Diablo is the first action RPG that it actually spawned the genre. So to me, it's weird to just not be able to say ARPG because I feel like there's really only one kind, but that's not
Mhm.
the case. Everybody calls their game an ARPG these days. So ours is more like a Diablo game in that sense, in that it's a similar kind of combat and there's like a similar kind of item game associated with it. And there's lots of monsters that need to be destroyed. And so it's very, very similar along those lines, but it diverges in other areas. So I'm going to talk like a designer here for a little bit, because this is like for us, well, for me, like the really exciting part, is that we kind of feel that going into this, when we started the company, we were like, we weren't immediately going to make an ARPG. We thought, well, why does it have to be that? And we didn't necessarily have like an idea for what we felt was going to be a worthy game to make as an ARPG. Our feeling was there's no reason to make another one unless it has a reason to, and that reason to be in our mind came down to this is that our feeling is that ARPGs have become very stagnant. Like in a sense, we think that almost every single one has really just been a copy of D2 dressed up with new skin and some slight changes in something like maybe on the the class skill design. Everybody likes to change that, but it doesn't really fundamentally change.
It's like the Marvel movies. They just keep cloning themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't really fundamentally change the experience in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And that the more you spend 90% of your time fighting monsters. And if that
Hmm.
doesn't change in some way, then did you really make it different? And our feeling was it was time for somebody to take a risk and go off in a slightly different direction and kind of push the genre forward a little bit more, but not changing it into a different genre. I think there's a lot of folks who've made ARPGs recently or in the progress of releasing them who are quote unquote saying they're innovating ARPGs, but what they've really done is they've turned it into a different genre. Our goal is to make an ARPG that ARPG players love. Like if you liked games like Diablo, then you should love what we're making. Our goal is to please that audience. So things that we are changing, things that we are innovating on are like bringing some new elements in that allow us to have a more depth, but not have a game that is difficult to acquire or difficult to understand or learn. But still gives you more as a player to chew on. Like there's more stuff to engage with, more decisions to make, but you don't feel overwhelmed by it. And that's a bit of a trick to do within the genre. So we're going to lean a lot on our strengths. I wish I could just say we're doing X and it's going to be like Y, but right now where we're at, I can't. I have to talk a little indirectly. So our strengths, though, as a company, as game designers, really comes down, I think, to these things, which is like best in class combat. Like I am a combat designer. Jay is really good at combat. All the games that we've shipped have been very focused on delivering a great combat experience. Um, in my opinion, D3 is still the best in class of combat today in shipping games. There's always new ones coming out, but so we're going to bring that expertise to the table and have just a great feeling combat experience. Uh, we all are sort of on the crazy side, I think, where like Jay and I, when we find something that's fun, we just want to put it in the game. And sometimes we've had ideas in the past that just can't get put in the game because they don't fit inside the IP. And so we've designed the IP for our game to allow more things to fit in it. I can't speak to specifics there. Just we see that that's a problem. These games really need a lot of content, and so having like a base fantasy for the game that is a little bit more like lenient and allows for more crazy stuff to happen. That I think just suits the kind of stuff that we like to do. Um, we are we're kind of adding stuff to the main combat experience. It's like a harvesting ability, but it's not like the kind of harvesting we've seen in other ARPGs where you just like click on a pile of stuff and then pick it up. This is more like a mini game that is melded with the regular combat game, and this gives us a new kind of depth in the experience. Gives you more to do and more things to think about and more decisions that you can make, and creates a lot of depth, but it doesn't make the game harder to play. We've got a fresh take on classes. Since our IP mixes a little bit of sci-fi with the fantasy, it's allowed us to kind of step outside the box on typical class design and bring some new things to the table in terms of the heroes that you'll play and the kinds of things that they get to do. We've got a wild new take on the way that we design and implement monsters, and that they are going to be capable of more often delivering surprises to the player and have combinatorial outcomes that you haven't seen. I know I just said really designery things,
Hmm.
but we're not ready to talk about it fully. Just it's wild. When I've shown other people what we're doing exactly, their faces usually like
Oh
they're
wow.
yeah, it's
Jaw dropping.
everyone who's seen it and heard what we're doing there is been pretty lit up by it. So yeah, it's definitely crazy town. One way I can say it a little bit is like this. Right now in most ARPGs, we sort of have this understanding that it's kind of one of the invisible goals is that the player can tinker and tinker and tinker, and eventually they sort of make a build that's so powerful that they feel like they broke the game. But then once they've done that, they sort of run out of challenges. So one way to think about it is what if the monsters are capable of breaking sometimes? And they that happens when you've sort of hit the point where you broke the game, and then suddenly, wait a minute, now there's some challenges again. I broke the game, but now all of a sudden the game's breaking me. So there's a little bit of a push and pull going on there
Wow.
that I think is going to be kind of cool. Uh, Other things, we're leaning really hard on the proceduralism. I think over time, most of the games have leaned away. If I look back on the ARPGs that have been released, I would say I think D2 is the most procedural uh, ARPG yet made. And not because other teams haven't invested in or don't have a lot of procedural systems. It's that making procedural systems that are meaningful to the player and actually affect the way that they play is no small trick. It's easy to randomize things, but it's not easy to randomize things in a way that matters. And what I see sort of in the space is a lot of games that do a lot of randomization, but it just doesn't mean anything. Uh, and so we are going to kind of go back to where D2 left off and pick up from some of the approaches that were taken there and move that forward. And we tend to we want to sort of expand on that into allowing like proceduralism on the monsters themselves, and proceduralism in the campaign, proceduralism in every place that is good for the game and can meaningfully affect the experience. I mentioned the new IP, but we also have a new take on the art style. It's really exciting to us in that it looks pretty much like unlike anything else out there. It's like a polygonal style, but it's gritty. It's not happy polygons.
Yeah,
um,
normally you think of like blend or low poly stuff. It's all very like happy
yeah,
unicorns, cutesy stuff.
yeah. So we're doing very gritty, not cute, polygonal approach, but it's still stylized. And one of the cool things about it is for us, and I think that, indirectly for players, is that it's very fast. Like we can build really good looking stuff very quickly. And this allows us to stay small as a team, but still deliver a lot of content on a rapid scale. And I think this is a place where a lot of teams struggle once the game goes live. It's hard to keep up with your fans' appetite,
Yeah.
like what they can chew through. And so this puts us, I think, more on a little bit more of an equal footing where we can crank out the content at a pace that keeps fans engaged.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like I'm thinking of like Diablo 4 versus what you're describing, right? It's completely two different universes. One is just hyper realistic. It takes a
Yeah,
thousand, months to build one character versus you building something more robust, and you can just focus on the gameplay and focus on more fun aspects of it and just be a little more mobile. That's amazing. That's so cool.
yeah,
Now, you touched upon the art. So my next question is going to be because you worked at Blizzard and you knew all these incredible artists, and now you're starting your own company, and doing like a new art. Were you able to pull or rehire some of the artists that you worked with in the past, or can you talk a little more about your team?
yeah, yeah. We had a big list of people who wanted to join. Unfortunately, bigger than we were able to secure funding for. Right now the funding environment's pretty constrained, and which is kind of unfortunate. We had so many people we really did want to work with again. Like, I know I kind of went down this path of crumbing on all the things that were bad about Blizzard, but I think it's important to keep pointing out, like, no, like the people were great, and there's so many people we would want back if we could get them. That said, we are going to be very small. So we're going to be well, 7 people total in the company, but 6 of us are the developers. There's like six developers and Dan CEO. And so we secured 2 former Blizzard artists. I'm not going to give you full names, but David is was an animator on the WoW and uh, uh, Rumble games, um, and he's sort of going to head up everything on the character side. So that's a great get for us. It's really important in a company this small that people be interested in and be capable of wearing lots of different hats. This isn't a place where you can just say I'm an animator and that's what I do, or I'm a VFX artist. Like, no, you got to do like 4 or 5 jobs at once. And so finding people who are excited about that, but also bring that mountain of expertise that you've got at a place like Blizzard is like super crucial. A second artist, Jared, is sort of heading up more of the environment side, and he's really a tech artist by trade, but he has been embedded both in character teams and environment teams on various projects. And he and I worked directly before on a project, well, on D4 and on another project at Blizzard that didn't see the light of day. He's amazing. He's really good at Houdini. And we're doing a lot of procedural things in the game. We're also, in order to go fast, we're doing a lot of procedural things in terms of just the art production. And Houdini is really kind of at the forefront of that. That's its sort of bread and butter. And so that those two guys really made a great, I think, a pretty good combo for us, like a 1-2 punch. Especially David, who's really excited about moving away from Maya. I know I'm jumping into tools here a little bit, but this
That's one of my questions. So yeah, you can
this
transition into tools.
part of the strategy is
Yeah,
is
yeah.
thinking about it is not just, well, who's a good person. Like, that was, by the way, we had so many folks we could have picked, but it's also around, well, yeah, but how are we going to do this, and like what's the right mindset. Are they passionate about ARPGs? Are they passionate about what we're doing as a company? But also, are they plugged in to sort of the adventure? Like, because the
Hmm.
adventure just isn't doing it. The adventure in some cases is we're doing it in a way that hasn't, I wouldn't say necessarily hasn't been done before, but is very recently like cutting edge in some ways. Like Houdini is pretty, it's been used for a while now, but it's still not, I think, prominent. And then all of the rigging and animation we're going to do now actually in Unreal. We're not going to use Maya. We've
Oh, wow.
like, we're literally not going to have any Maya seats.
That's
That
crazy.
that is bleeding edge stuff, right? Like, we're taking some
You're
risks.
literally on the front lines. Like it's so cool to
Yeah.
talk to you. You have no idea. Like you're literally coming from Blizzard, starting a new company, got investors, talking about the team that is I mean, so many of us, including, many of us, are looking for opportunities and jobs, and you're describing in precise detail what it takes to get hired. The experience is important, but the fact that you mentioned that every one of these artists can wear multiple hats, like all this knowledge that you're sharing is just so valuable. I really appreciate it. Yeah, so
Mhm.
Maya's, would you say Maya's fading and or
I
Unreal
think
is
Maya's
becoming
fading.
better? Like, what's your thing?
Well, Maya's 20 years old, right? So, like, I don't get me
Blender's
wrong.
20 years old too, I think, no?
Yeah, like, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm big into Maya. Maya was a huge part of me being able to accelerate my career. I jumped right into the scripting side when it showed up at 1.0 and dove super hard into it. And it's one of the ways that I got that job at Blizzard. It was a huge accelerant. So
Mel, you're using Mel?
yeah, I did that back in the Mel days.
Hmm.
I just understood like the advantage in pipeline development that was going to open up, and I knew that if you were good at that, there would just be jobs aplenty, and so that was part of my strategy. So I don't have like, I have a fondness for Maya. At the same time, it's really stagnant. It's been the same program for far too long, and it really hasn't innovated. Like, they've just sort of skipped. They're slapping new interfaces on the same junk, and it really needs to move forward, and it hasn't. So I don't like using Maya anymore because I expect more from a modern piece of software than what it provides, and it actually feels clunky to me. Even though I'm very well practiced at it and I can use it in my sleep, I just don't think it's the place to be anymore. And what we see is, I think the reason why it's been around for so long is you have a lot of studios that have invested in it. They've built a lot of custom pipeline tools to make it work. And the other one is that animators are hard to hire. It's very hard to find good animators. And when animators say, this environment is the environment I want to be in, you're going to do that. That's what you're going to build around. They kind of hold all the cards in this. They are the linchpin. Now, it doesn't mean they're all happy with Maya necessarily. And what we see is Unreal is their new tool set is just like better in so many ways and so much more expedient. And one of those is simply not having to go to an external tool. Like, you are making stuff for a game engine and you can make it in the game engine. What, like nobody wants to go to another tool and bounce files.
You can't model though in Unreal, can you?
You can do some of that, but who cares? It's animation that matters, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
like it just doesn't, like the animation is the linchpin. So my prediction is that once this becomes commonly used, like this becomes like studios break into animating and rigging on the Unreal side, I my prediction is Maya dies. Like it'll die overnight.
Wow.
It'll stay the way it is until it isn't, and then it'll be a sea change in 12 months, and that'll be the end.
Oh
Uh,
my God.
yeah, because it's being you kind of it's just being what's the word uh it,
Challenged.
yeah, like yeah, it's being usurped. There's just a big end run going on right now with what Unreal is doing
And
with.
you're not even mentioning Blender. Like that's like this big beast in the corner that's like eyeing Maya, and it's kind of like
Yeah, I don't think Blender. I know I think Blender is the future from a modeling standpoint, but I think the misread is that modeling is
animation.
why people are using Maya. That isn't. It's
Yeah.
animation. Like I can tell you from a leadership standpoint, the thing has been, hey, should we be using another software? And then here's what happens. We say, well, okay, uh, could we move to that software? Who's on board? And then, of course, all
Mhm.
the modelers raise their hands, and then the animators and tech artists who have to make the animation pipeline are like, no, and that's it. You're
Yeah.
done. And why? Because those people are harder to get. Those people are. It's not that they're more important. It's just that the market for animation and tech art has always been more constrained than the modeling side, and so it's a hiring problem fundamentally.
Mm.
It's just how many
Wow.
of your animators do you want to piss off and have to rehire? And then when you go to rehire them and you tell your new animators you aren't working in the environment that they expect, are you going to be able to hire them anymore? Right. And so nobody
Mm.
wants to risk that. And so I think the linchpin in unseating Maya has always been in disrupting the animation pipeline. And once you do that, then everything crumbles. Then that's it. Everything will break loose. Blender will come in and take over, and Blender's already doing a really good job of that on the modeling and texturing front. But I just think that what Unreal's doing is actually the sort of the hole in the dam.
Yeah, because you're right. If you're in the game space, not like a film industry or short space, if you're in the game space, you know what? But even I'm not even for shorts and animation, people are using Unreal for video stuff as well. Like it really is. I'm kind of sad that I'm not deeper into it. I need to kind of start pivoting as well. I'm like you. If I hang on to something, I don't want to let it go. I spent so many years learning Maya, and I love
Yeah,
Maya so much. And when I talk to you or other people in the space, I could see that it's pivoting and it's so sad, but I understand that that's part of the change.
yeah. I look at it's not the only tool. I don't want to like dump on Maya and Autodesk. They're not the only tool that suffers from this problem. Photoshop is
Yeah.
another one I think is ripe for the taking. And that program still works like it did when I used it as a beta in 19 like 89 or whatever. It still has modal dialogues. It still has fields that when you put your cursor in them, like it holds your focus and you don't realize it and you think you're doing something else and it turns out you get an error message and it's like what? It kind of
Yeah.
that's so ancient. No, I don't see why. In fact I think it's criminal that there isn't a photo edit. Maybe there is, and I'm not aware because I don't do a lot of photo editing in truth. But in this day and age, I need a photo editing app that a has no modal modalities. Period. Like end of story. And there's no reason for any kind of destruction. And I know that Photoshop allows you to specially say this is a non-destructive layer in some regards, but I think at its basis, like fundamental level, everything should just be non-destructive as a default, not like what the hell. Lightroom
Yeah.
doesn't destroy anything. Why does Photoshop? And they own both of those applications. Even After Effects, as ancient as it is, I feels like a step beyond where Photoshop is. So I think that there's just a tipping point where somebody makes a an app that does as much as you need Maya or excuse me Photoshop to do, but also starts to work in a fundamentally new way, and then that's it. Like these old apps just are going to die. Um,
And then the Photoshop comment, I just want to add to that that I've been watching a lot of videos where the artists are absolutely, crazy about the fact that Photoshop or Adobe announced that they're going to use anything you open in any one of those Adobe programs as AI training,
yeah,
and people just freaked out. So I'm not really, concerned about that personally because I don't really create art unique enough to like sell or anything like that. I do tutorials, I do some client work, but I could see how millions of art, thousands, and millions, thousands of artists got really
yeah.
upset over this.
Well, it's not just them either. From the company standpoint, you have sometimes complicated relationships between things like looking at it just from a game development standpoint, where you can have a studio that's making a game and they have a publishing deal, and parts of those publishing deals usually gives the publisher rights and ownership over the assets, and that's supposed to be exclusive. And then now you have a company that's you're using the tools is saying, no, no, we are going to scrape those assets, and that's like, wait a minute, I think there's like a legal problem potentially
They
there.
got to reverse that. That can't stand, right? Can it?
But the fact that they're doing it is enough for you to just say, well, I think we need to look elsewhere. Like
Yeah,
this is, I don't trust this situation because they're clearly like they didn't, I don't,
they
if
crossed the
they
line.
thought
Yeah,
about it and they did it anyway, that's bad. If they didn't think about it, it's bad. And so like trust goes way down. And so you start looking
yeah.
around, which is what I'm doing now. I'm actually looking for something that can do all the things I need to do. And which is actually not a lot, to be quite frank. I think as long as I've used that app, I think good tools, you get expedient, you end up using about 10% of it and you get everything done with that 10%. So I'm just looking for an app that gives me that 10%, and then I'll move on.
So just to summarize, the tools, if you don't mind sharing, the tools
Mhm.
that you're using for your personal or for the current game are going to be you're going away from Maya, you're using Unreal,
Yep.
Houdini. What are some other programs that are important for new artists that are watching this video that
Yep.
need to learn?
So for sure, Blender, I know kind of skipped over Blender and said made it seem like it wasn't important. It's totally important. It's doing a lot of some of those things that Houdini does. Blender also does, and it's absolutely the future. I would give any if you go back 5 years, people would ask me this Blender or Maya, and I would say, well, if you want a job right now, you kind of have to learn Maya. That's starting to change, and I just can't see Blender in the modeling texturing space not overtaking. Um, I don't think Autodesk has an answer to this personally. So I would give anybody advice like learn Blender is your primary right now. I don't. I think Maya is a good backup, but 3D programs the way they are, once you've learned one, it's a lot easier to learn the next.
Yes,
I
I'm
would
I'm
just
I'm learning that. Yeah.
I would just flip the priority and I would dive into Blender first. I think it's going to be the hot future, and there will be this point in time that where kind of like one of the things that gave me leverage getting into Blizzard North was the fact that at that time there was sort of a there was like a website where you would go to find all of the mel tools to extend. You got this hot new thing, and the mel tools were make it hotter, and everybody wanted to see and get all their hands on all this stuff. And at that point in time, I actually had the most and they weren't garbage, useful mail scripts on that forum. And so when it came time to interview me, they were like, "Oh wait, we're already using your tools,
Oh wow.
right?" And wow, talk about like an in. Like they're thinking about hiring me, and they're already using my stuff, right? This
Yeah.
is like this perfect sort of like inflection moment that happens when there's a big transition to a new tool where the people who are recognized as already really far down the road end up being like hot commodities at that time. And this can really accelerate your ability to move through a career space. Like it can help move you along faster. I see Blender and Houdini both as apps that are ripe for that like inflection point right now. Like if you're hot on those things and you're really good at them, there is within the next few years, you're just going to see an explosion, I think, of studios that are starting to hire for it.
I love
That's my
it. Wow.
prediction. Don't hold me to it. But
So so
I've
you
been pretty accurate about it so far.
So you touched up on it, but what's your perspective on the current like job market for like 3D artists and designers with all this it seems like we're all standing on thin ice and everything is just changing by the minute. And
Yeah.
what's your take on the whole job market?
Dude, it sucks right now. There's no question about it. Like it's a hard time. And I think it's difficult. Like some of the things that I've got to say, I don't think make it better any better, unfortunately. In that it part is a lot of things that got us this way. One of them is over investing. There was um, this sort of feeding frenzy of starting studios and greenlighting projects that happened around the pandemic. You see it in a lot of industries. Like there's a lot of industries that looked at what was going on in the pandemic as a sea shift that was going to last forever, which is a little short-sighted. It may even seem silly right now to think that that's the way it was going to be, but they did. And I actually benefited from it from a little while because I left Blizzard around the same time. But one of the things I saw, because right after Blizzard, I became a consultant. I still needed money, but our goal was to strap the company, and an easy way for me to do that was to work as a consultant part time, and I did so for about 15 different companies. Some of them big, like I worked on Hogwarts Legacy, and some of them small companies like that you may not have heard of. But one of the things I noticed, most of them were new teams or recently teams or companies that were medium-sized companies that were expanding. There was one company I was working for, I think it was Phoenix Labs, and they had something like 10 different prototype teams working at once. And the commonality that I saw was that none of the teams were were had enough depth to actually ship anything, in my opinion. Like I'd see these teams full of people, and you would have one or two people who had actual experience, who had shipped multiple products, or had, and most often, even worked on the genre of the game that they were making. And then to me, that looks like a team that just can't get it done. Like maybe, like you can always get lucky, but the chances that all of these teams that were sort of like short-handed, especially in the experience department, were all going to make games and ship and be successful was highly unlikely. And at some point, I'm starting to ask, like, what is going on? Like, I've got ten teams in a row, and none of them are really going.
Capable.
And of course, some of those have now folded. So that kind of just shows that there was this sort of like over investment, over optimistic investment. It kind of does coincide with a shift in the way that games all and game companies were invested in. If you go back, 15 years and earlier, there was pretty much only like you either got an angel investor or private money, or most often you got a publishing deal of some kind, right? That's how you that was the more dominant way that you broke in. And in the last sort of 10 years or so, I don't know the exact date when this shift started to happen, but it's become like VC dominated. And the problem there is, who among these VCs actually has experience with the game industry enough to actually know how to discern what is a worthwhile investment or not. But also the way the VC angle kind of goes is that they want to lay like 20 bets, and they're going to lay 20 bets on 20 companies that they think have a potential to earn $1 billion, but they're prepared for 18 of them to die because they
Mm.
only need two to make money, right? And so that just assumes that, well, 18 of those 20
We're not going to make it.
are not going to make
Even
it.
even if you make it a little bit, you seem to be successful. If you don't meet their
Yeah.
projections, you're gonna get canned anyways.
And the problem that we should all have with this, in my opinion, is those. That's not just when we talk about it as an abstract. It's a team that didn't complete. It's a studio that shut down, and that's people. That's people and their jobs and their livelihoods. There's people that move.
Thousands of people, yeah.
Yeah, and so we are sort of in the midst of a cycle where all of that investment money and this reckless kind of like we call frothy investment of what I'm just going to say is kind of dumb money, maybe is a way of saying it. They're not that they're dumb people, it's that there isn't enough actual experience to be able to ferret out what's a healthy investment. And it's all unwinding. And we're not done, in my opinion, with that unwinding process. And so I think that there is some amount of pain uh, remaining across the entire industry. I think you also see a lot of people, companies that they look around, maybe their financials are fine, but they look around and they see company after company doing layoffs. And there is a kind of a group think that happens, which is like, well, geez, what do they know? Like maybe they know something we don't. Maybe they see something that we don't. Maybe we should, if they can have a layoff, we should have a layoff. We should be leaner. And that I wouldn't say that's always a bad instinct. It's just sometimes they're not even doing it for necessarily good reasons. They're just doing it to just not get caught off
Yeah,
guard.
and to add to that, to what you're saying, I heard someone speak, which made a lot of sense to me. They said if a very large company lays many thousands of artists off, at the end of the year, that shows in their accounting as profit, and that looks good for the investors. So it's like a strategy of
Yes.
always downgrading, upscaling that. So it's like it's always moving.
Yeah, for public companies, I mean, it's true of public companies that usually when they lay people off, that the result is the stock price goes up, which
Hmm.
sucks.
That
Um,
sucks, yeah.
so there is even an incentive sometimes to do it. So I don't know. It's really hard to say exactly what all the reasons are. These are sort of the
With a lot of factors.
big factors that I see, and based on what I've seen as a consultant and the number of studios that got started, I don't, and they're not all, on like they haven't, it hasn't completely unwound because some of those companies still have money. And what happens is that very commonly these days, when you go to start a studio, you don't get all the money that you need to ship. You get enough money to get to a place where you can prove that you deserve the remaining money that you need to ship. And so
Hmm.
there's a lot of companies out there that got their first round or maybe even their second round, but they need a third. And right. And for the first few rounds, it was COVID days where money was cheap and flowing and everyone was throwing, sure, you need more money and you're a team and you absolutely. And it wasn't, there just wasn't such a high bar to meet. And right now, everybody is doing the opposite. All the people with the investment money are trying to hang on to that money for the most part. They're being very, very, very cautious about what they invest in. And so a lot of those companies that got money in the, say, 2020, 21, 22 timeframe are showing up in this current time frame looking for their next round and finding that doors are closed. And maybe they didn't, and maybe for good reason, maybe because they didn't actually have such a viable product now. And like it's a sort of a sobering market now. So um yeah, it's really unfortunate because it's just people are the ones who are the victims in all of this. It's the artists and designers who got on board and invested their time and their efforts into these things and are kind of being chewed up in the process, and that kind of sucks. That's all bad news. And
Hmm.
I do think there is some good news. I want to like to shift the tone a little bit.
Yeah, let's pivot. Yeah.
Yeah, like I don't think you need another person telling you how bad it is. Anyway, I'm just trying to characterize how I think we got here. And so the better news is this. Because the 2023 timeframe, you have a lot of people hanging on to money. The truth is undeployed money makes you no money and you can't hang on to it forever. And so you have a lot of publishers who maybe didn't write any deals in the 2023 timeframe. And what that means is, they look out several years to see, well, what's going to happen? Like, what are we shipping in 2025, 26, 27? Because they didn't write anything in 2023. They're starting to see these big gaps where that they have to fill because if they don't ship new stuff, they can't make money. And so we are seeing some signs that this is loosening up and there are deals being written. And we're fortunate. We just got funded. And so I think that there is some signs of a shift in the dynamic towards that. Another thing that I think can help people right now is to recognize a different shift that's going on in the dynamic, which is a shift away from large, expensive teams and expensive projects that have typically dominated the industry towards teams that exist in different economic climates and teams that are smaller and more lean. So 2024 has kind of been the year of small teams that have shipped very successful products. That's what we're seeing. Like a lot of indie teams are shipping huge successful games. And this is sort of, I think, just shifted everybody away from this mindset of like if you're an investor for a long time, the right way to do it seemed to be to gather a giant chunk of money, hire some people away from another famous company, such as Blizzard or whatever, build up a giant team immediately, and go after a AAA product launch. And that's super risky. New team, right? Uh, very expensive team, like long time frames, and you may or may not ship something that works. And so what we
Mhm.
see now is a shift towards greenlighting smaller, lean, smarter teams that don't cost as much and don't have as much risk attached to them. So all of this is a long way to say that I think 2024 through 2020, who knows, the next 3 years, maybe longer, is sort of like the era of sort of a reignition of indie teams making high quality games is sort of like the new theme, I think. And so if I was a person looking for like what should I get into, I would shift focus away from big companies and look at smaller projects and startups as a way to do it. Now, I know a lot of people don't like the idea of startups because the volatility, but I would point out that that volatility right now in large companies is there. Like you see these massive layoffs, they are not stable anymore. And so if the volatility is equal on either side, I would lay my bet on the lean team that doesn't need a massive outlay in 2 years in order to complete, right? In the way of thinking, I think the smaller teams are less vulnerable, and I would shift my focus in that direction.
I love it. So, yeah, so the space is definitely uncertain, but one things that makes sense is that the opportunity and the players and the audience is still there. They are always hungry for content. They're always hungry for good games. There's millions or billions of teenagers that want to play games that are not connected or affected by how what happens with the artists and the
Right.
developers. They just want to play, so they're willing to buy, and it's just fascinating to see. So your prediction is that it's not like the game space and the 3D space is dying off and AI is going to take over and this is the end of the world. You're saying it's just a transition and we need to continue, being positive and learning, and it's just going to go back up, but maybe in different form, like through
It,
indie companies
yeah,
versus big companies.
we have a lot of chaos and a lot of turmoil, and I don't want to make light of that. What's going on right now is awful for people. It's easy to understate that, right? But
Yeah.
on the what I don't see as part of the current climate is what we're Steam broke records. There's more people playing Steam games now than there was last year, and
Yeah.
they're predicted to keep on breaking those records. There's a prediction that says that they're going to triple the amount of users over like the
Wow.
next 5, 6 years or whatever. So that what
The
that says
consumers are there.
that yeah, the appetite for playing games hasn't died off, and we have record-breaking games that have shipped. There's like just come out, and continue to come out. And so if records are being broken and players are showing up because people are making great games, even though they might look a little bit different or be made by different entities than we're used to seeing. Um, like that actually is a healthy sign that says that the games industry is growing. It's just not growing along the same path that it has been for a long time, which is consolidation among large conglomerate, corporations with massive teams making AAA games. That was sort of the place to go. And now it's not. That does make it a little more challenging too, because sometimes you see these shifts to other regions, right? Like I suspect a lot of development teams are being closed down by large companies in the US in order to shift into, we see this, some studios opening up in other economies because they're cheaper. And
Mhm.
so everybody's just there's just a lot going on in terms of things that are shifting. But I think if you keep your eyes open, also the era of remote is not dead. Like we are a fully remote company. Remote has a lot of advantages. There are more and more and more companies that are operating in a global way um, than ever before. And so sometimes your location may not matter as much. So I think if you just kind of keep your ear to the ground in that way and kind of look for those kinds of opportunities, then there's stuff out there.
That's one of my
Maybe not today,
final
but tomorrow.
questions. That was actually one of my final questions because you spent so many years working in the office, and now you're remote. Like how does that compare, like production wise, quality wise, trusting that the person is not playing a game and that they're actually working? Do you have to like always look over their shoulder, or is it because you hired someone you trust? Like how would you are there pros and cons? Maybe there's some pros of working next to an artist in the office that you get inspired and you hear you see their art, and it's different than you working at home by yourself. Like, can you just touch on that real quick as just a
Yeah.
final question?
Um, I love remote work. I For me, fuck offices. Like I'm never going back. I used to get sick all the time. Like when I was in my 20s, I didn't get sick. Well, maybe I did. I don't remember it. But like, when you're 40, you start getting sick all the time. I would say I was a person who spoke at BlizzCon every year, and I know that's not the office, but without fail, the last 7 years that I worked at Blizzard, I got sick from BlizzCon every single time, and then the company only gives you like what 7 days, and then they force you to work at BlizzCon where you get sick for those 7 days, and you're like, wait a minute, like you gave me 7 days and you ate it back, ate it up. So that kind of like you just sort of accepted back then that you just get sick. And now I'm working at home and I hardly ever get sick. Like it's uncanny. Uh, I'll get off the sick thing. It's more, I get to break up my day in the ways that I want to, because we have sort of a loose core hours. There are things that happen at certain times, but the rest of it doesn't. And I, I, I suspect I'm like a lot of other creatives and people who work in the games industry, and that I'm very spurty. Um, I I can't be creative at all hours of the day. I can't when I want to program, I can't program at all hours of the day. I can't like do simulations in Embergen at just any time of the day. I can, but I'm not as good at it
No, I
as
think it's a human thing. It's like asking a
yeah,
poet to write a poem at 1:15, go. No, you have to be inspired. You have to align
right.
yourself with the energy, of course.
Yeah, mornings there's some things I can do really well almost every single time. If I got programming to do and I get to it in the morning, it's gonna be fire. It's probably gonna taper off by 3 o'clock, and it
Yeah,
isn't going to come back until about 9. Right. And so I get to do that, and I can't do that in an office. And so the
right.
office is getting way less out of me because I have to power through it and I'm just being crappy. I get to ride my bike. This is not an exaggeration, 500% more than when I worked in an office because I can just take off for an hour and do that whenever I have an hour to do it. Whatever that time is, it happens. Um, I'm not burning gas, and that feels really good. Uh, yeah,
That's
F
amazing.
that. Like that sucks. And then I think the final reason, and this is those are all big reasons, and this one trumps all of them. Like I will fight to the death to preserve it. I I get to work with my cat sits next to me all
Wait, is he there now?
yeah, she's sleeping.
Oh, okay. Well, don't wake her up. It's
I
okay.
won't wake her up, but I now that I've had that, there's no
Yeah.
way in hell you're gonna get me back in an office.
My dog is by me too, so I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, like this is your family and you get to be with them
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah.
I'm never giving that up. I just this is no way. It just I think about all the time now that I spend in offices, and I'm kind of a little mad. It's like, man,
Yeah.
my pet's just why does he go away all the time?
In some terrible way, I mean, I hate saying this, but I mean, COVID kind of reprogrammed the entire planet. Everyone got a little taste of staying at home, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, wait a minute, that was horrible what happened to the entire planet, but everyone now knows what it feels like to work at home, right?
Yeah, it was horrible, and I don't want to assign good things to a pandemic that killed so many people.
Yeah.
That said, it did give us some tastes of things that I don't think we previously were able to contemplate, and it lasted long enough for some of those things to gain a foothold. And
Hmm.
for me, like, yes, this working at home, like immediately the first day, I was so happy. Like, this is the best thing ever. I mean, not happy about COVID at all, but like working from home was great. And
Yeah.
the second thing was, hey, when people didn't drive, the planet started to be healthy again very quickly. And it's like, we 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 could do this. Seemed to
Yeah.
be the thing I got out of it. Like wait a minute, like this was forcing us to have to do a thing everyone says we can't do. Now that we have this big swing back into the offices where companies are saying everybody has to, I like, no, that's the other reason
No.
why I'm just never going back to, and it's unthinkable to go work for a company that does that.
Well, I love that you're saying that. I feel the same way. Now with Zoom, you can or
Yeah.
so there's 6 trillion different programs you can do. Share screen, you could see each other, so you could still work next to each other. It's incredible.
I do have to own up to my privilege here that I am privileged to not have to work in an office. I'm privileged to be able to start my own company. There's a lot of things that I just am lucky enough to be able to have a position like that too. And I
Well, you're
recognize
blessed for sure. Yeah.
there are a lot of people out there who don't have that. But hopefully, as we can keep angling towards it, we can get to a place where more people can enjoy that than not.
Wow. Julian, I feel like I could talk to you for months. You're just like an encyclopedia of information. If somebody wanted to follow your work, or eventually you're gonna launch the game and start talking about that a little bit more, where would be a good place to maybe follow you or just kind of keep in touch with you or the company?
Yeah, I have to admit we don't spend the most time on social media these days. We are
Okay, not
like
yet.
neck deep, but like we do have a website, which is www gasgiant.games. There's not a lot going on there right now, but there is a newsletter you can sign up for, and eventually we will get to a place where we are sharing more information. And there will be more structure coming online to give people access. It is our intention to try to be as open about development as we can, even though I had to be kind of secretive today. It's not, we really want to try to open the doors as much as possible, as soon as possible. We do have a little bit of a presence on LinkedIn. I know we have an Insta account where those things aren't necessarily the most active, but I expect to see those things kind of grow over time, like especially once we get to a point where we have like a first playable and we start to want to open the doors, have people come in and check it out.
Do you have a date for the first playable? And are you also gonna have like a beta team, so like a sign up or no?
Eventually, we're pretty far out from the notion of a beta at this
Okay.
point. We're focused on more near term things like we're like I would call us like we're in a pre-production phase, and that
Okay.
we're not actively, making content that we know for sure ends up in the game. We're sort of figuring out a lot of the basics in terms of how the game gets made. We do have a complete prototype, so we know exactly what we're making. We're not trying to figure that out, but it's sort of the okay. You made your prototype, and now you got to throw that away, and you've got to like build it for real. And that's kind of the phase that we're in. So I don't have any dates to share or anything like that. It's just way too
Okay.
early for that. But I think, if you want to just, if something you want to keep an ear towards or an eye on, then you can follow us on LinkedIn. You can follow us on Instagram, Gas Giant Games. And of course, our newsletter that you can get to off our website. And yeah, even though we're a little quiet now, that it will change, I think, very, very quickly.
Well, I'm totally looking. I'm fired up. I'm really excited for your game and someone with your insane experience creating, putting your love into it, your whole soul. And I can't wait to see what you come up with. Thank you so much, man, for joining me today. Do you have any final comments for 18-year-old 3D artist in India who is excited to get into this space? Any kind of inspirational
Yeah,
messages?
it really is simple. I do have a lot of people. Well, every once in a while, there's sort of like a family friend or whatever says, my son or daughter wants to get into games. What do you think they ought to do? And or how do they go about it? Which schools, stuff like that. And it really comes, unfortunately, sometimes unfortunately, and sometimes fortunately, it comes down to this. Like schools, great, it'll help, but it will not get you a job. Bottom line is people hire people in the games industry who can do what needs to get done. And the thing that really needs to get done the most is to understand what needs to get done in a lot of ways, right? And that comes from building stuff. So my number one piece of advice is the same advice that I gave myself when I wanted to break into the industry, which is just build stuff that demonstrates that you can do it. Go get an engine, and it doesn't matter which one. Get Unreal, get Unity, get Go, it doesn't matter, and just build anything at all. You will learn so much more by trying to build something than you can sitting in a class. And then, of course, what you're doing is what the industry needs from you. And then you have a thing that you can show that looks like the thing that the team needs done, right? And then that makes you way more hireable than any other thing. So yeah, go grab a free engine and make a little game.
Wow, I love it. I feel inspired by you. That's amazing. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, man. I appreciate it, and hopefully we can talk again soon.
Yeah,
And
thanks. Yeah, it's been
yeah,
great. And yeah, maybe we'll do it again with a different subject matter or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
I have infinite questions for you. So as long as you could, start sharing more, or I even would love to talk to you about art and everything else. But yeah, thank you so much, Julian.
Thanks for having me.